Google search, you'll see what Barack Obama inherited and what's happened since he took office.
All right, it's Bush's fault. You know what? His term is almost over as president. Well, no, it's really time to stop blaming Bush.
Turned it around.
And Barack, listen, George Bush.
We went from losing 1 million jobs a month.
You know, for how many months? For how many months?
For 12 months.
For 12 months, 1 million jobs a month? That's not true. You know perfectly well that that's not true. You're making stuff up. And this blame Bush stuff is ridiculous. And let me say another thing. For the vast majority of the Bush administration...
For your people.
Am I in the middle of a sentence? I mean, listen, don't be a fanatic, okay? I was in the middle of a sentence. For the majority of the Bush administration... Do you really just want me to hang up on you?
No, I'd like to...
For the majority of the Bush administration, unemployment rate was in the 5% range. Right?
What happened in the last year of the Bush administration?
And then in the last year, we were afflicted with an economic crisis having largely to do with, as you said, the housing market.
Right.
The housing market crash, we all know what created that. You've got your theory, I've got the reality. The question on the table, Mike, is what has Barack Obama done with regard to jobs and economic growth?
And what he's done several things. He passed stimulus that was 1/3 tax cuts, 1/3 aid to states, and 1/3 infrastructure spending. What that did was it took us from a place where we were losing 1 million jobs a month to 12 months later a break-even point where we weren't losing jobs to the months after that, and every month since we've been adding jobs.
You know that.
The other thing he's done is he bailed out the auto industry. Now, when you think about bailing out the auto industry, it's not just GM and Chrysler. It's the entire supply chain up and down.
Yeah.
All the people that make the tires and the plastics that go in the parts of the cars.
All right. Now let me respond a little bit.
Yeah.
The bailout of the auto industry was a bailout of the unions. Ford didn't take a bailout. Ford returned to profitability before GM and Chrysler, and you know perfectly well that that's the case. They should have simply reorganized as Ford did by filing, chapter whichever, and reorganizing under the tax laws. That would have allowed them, no doubt, to return to profitability more quickly than they have. Secondly, taxpayer bailouts of, investment of, and, hiring Rahm Emanuel's old business partner to become the chairman of GM when he said on the day that he was picked that he doesn't know anything about the auto industry. All terribly corrupt, all ridiculous. That doesn't spur economic growth. That was government spending. The 1/3 stimulus thing, 1/3 of that went to public sector unions in the states who had bankrupted themselves because Democrats overpromised and they couldn't deliver on what they promised on. It extended the lie for a year, and then they came back to the trough and say, now we need another stimulus because states are going to have to start laying people off now because we couldn't afford what we had set up in the first place. As for the infrastructure spending, the president famously said, I found out too late that there are no such thing as shovel-ready projects. That's because they set aside hundreds of billions of dollars that they thought would create all these union jobs, but there were no shovel-ready projects to go to. And you know as well as I do that they didn't even spend most of that money that was supposed to be spent on infrastructure. In fact, only a very small percentage of it was spent. So if that's what the president has done, if those are the highlights, spending $1 trillion in taxpayer money that we borrowed from the Chinese, at least 40 cents on the dollar.
Get a word a second?
And bailing out the auto industry, didn't create jobs, didn't spur the economy. Ford kind of puts the lie to the GM Chrysler success, and the states coming back to the federal government to ask for more money a year later puts the lie to the success of the stimulus.
Hey, Chris, I think I agree with a lot of what you just said there, but I think the highlight that you're missing is
But why do you guys keep citing it if you don't even agree with it?
Because I think the highlight that you're missing is that for all the problems that those programs had, we went from losing 1 million jobs a month to adding jobs every month in less than 12 months underneath Barack Obama.
Well, there
are a lot of problems with crony capitalism. There are a lot of problems with Barack Obama protecting the institutions that he came from. But the fact is, we've turned it around. We're adding jobs every month right now, and what he inherited was losing 1 million jobs a month.
What he inherited. Ronald Reagan didn't spend 4 years talking about what he inherited from Jimmy Carter and whining. The first victim president in the form of Barack Obama has really, turned into a pathetic proposition. And blaming Bush 3 years on and what he inherited. Most, as you undoubtedly know, Mike, most recessions have a cycle, and they happen. It's just part of life in the real world. had a cycle of about 16 months. Barack Obama has prolonged the recession through his actions. He hasn't shortened the cycle. And boo-hoo, what he inherited. It was a short period of time. It wasn't 1 million jobs a month for 12 months. You know perfectly well. You come out and you parrot these things that the party requires you to parrot, and you don't even believe them yourself because you know that once you hear the rest of the story, that these claims don't hold water. Barack Obama, night before last in Kansas, he's got this thing. He apparently doesn't believe that America is fair. He doesn't believe that our country or our economic system are fair. It's clear, based on everything that he's been saying since he was running for president, and I assume before that, when he was a community organizer and a state senator voting present, he doesn't believe that our country is fair. He thinks our country should be more fair. He thinks that somehow government is here to make things more fair. Isn't that interesting? More fair for everyone. Barack Obama and his fairness obsession.
I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot. When everyone does their fair share. When everyone plays by the same rules.
They love it. They're wooing. Fair.
These aren't Democratic values or Republican values. These aren't 1% values or 99% values. They're American values. And we have to reclaim them.
Reclaim them. Now, you don't have to reclaim something that already exists, so he believes that we live in an unfair. Again, you don't fundamentally transform something that you like, and you don't need to reclaim something that already exists. So he obviously believes that we live in an unfair, by his definition of fair. And I was scratching my head and saying, well, how do you make the country more fair, Mr. President? How do you make the country more fair? Pants on fire, nose as long as a telephone wire. We're at 888-630-9625. Barack Obama's solutions. And we had Mike the Lib trying to defend in the last hour, but honestly, if it even sounds like Mike the Lib is kind of coming around, it's like, well, what's to defend? I don't really have, the bailout of GM and Chrysler, that was good. The stimulus, we spent the $1 trillion, we borrowed $400 billion, and gosh, if it had only been bigger. And it kept states afloat in many cases for a year by paying salaries of public sector employees that the states can't afford to pay. Well, there's a good idea. What happens at the end of the year? I know. Let's go back to Mikey and get another $1 trillion. Barack Obama found out too late that there's no such thing as shovel-ready projects. Well, that was helpful. It's important to learn on the job $1 trillion at a time. No problem. Nobody's paying for it. It's free. It's Obama cash from that Obama stash. And the union guy says, well, what do they want? They want jobs, housing, health care. And then he says, well, that's what this great country is predicated on. That's what this great country is based on. That's what this great country is founded on. Really? What, the government providing jobs, housing, and health care? Is that what this country was founded on? That's what, the Soviet Union was founded on. That's what Mao's China was founded on. 70, 80 million dead later, we found out that economic system didn't really work very well.